Now, this is kind of an interesting one. They talked about them now wanting to do multi-expansion story arcs, like Mike, of course, brought up Emmett Selk. And that's the funny thing, because they have technically done multi-expansion arcs, but the way that it's been has just been teasers for lore nerds and then whole hog into the new thing, right? So a lot of us knew the death stuff was coming at the end of BFA. We just didn't know exactly how, right? Yeah. So then obviously we end up in this situation where Zoval is just one of the worst villains they've made. That being said, the idea that you can just have a villain appear within an expansion and work, like, that can happen.
Yeah, that's...
Zoval is not necessarily only a storytelling format problem. He is that, but he's also just not a competently told story.
It is full execution problem.
Yeah, be that competency of the people doing it, or be that what happens when it comes out through the other end of development.
Yes.
Because that has more of an impact than people know. In the same way, you may think a movie has a really, really shit script, but in reality, it maybe turns out the script was okay, but the point where the script is edited is actually, or, it gets its final edit, is the editor's bay when the movie's being cut together by an editor, right? Like, how many people, they're whatever, a great scriptwriter, and they see the final cut of the movie and like, what the fuck? This is not what I was really going for in my script. In the same way that even with, say, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, what's her surname? Sarah, she was working the audio director, like the musician, I think, or composer who was leading on that game. And that was another thing of, she did all this work for this game, but now she's sort of pulling away from the project and saying that it doesn't really represent her creative vision. So it's like, how could you do that for all this time and it doesn't represent her creative vision? So those sorts of like corporate dysfunction and production pipelines getting in the way of the story, those things can also be what will really fuck a story up, and then not having a good overall plan.
Yeah.
Now with FF, we always talk about how it's not necessarily all about having a plan. It's just about thoughtfully and carefully pulling threads that you've purposely left open for yourself in the past, which is what FF does.
Yeah.
But at least this with World of Warcraft and the whole self-contained thing, Sylvanas, as she was teased going into Legion, was a character with a differently planned arc to the one that we ended up getting.
Yeah, I think this...
Like, that's pretty much shit that people know.
Yeah, because I think the idea of we need to move to multi-story expansions, and I see a couple people talking about this on Twitter, that's not really the takeaway. The takeaway is not, we shouldn't do this in one expansion, we should have multiple. The take should be, we should have, if we're having a story that spans multiple expansions, we need to make it stay consistent and actually plan for it.
Yes.
And if we're doing something that's in one expansion, we have to actually execute on it. Because that's the fun thing. Everyone goes, Emmett Selk, incredible, one of the best villains of all time. Like, when did Emmett Selk show up? Late in 4.2 or 4.3 or so? 4.4 maybe? I think it would have been 4.4. I can't remember exactly. Emmett Selk was a one expansion villain. Emmett Selk was basically a one patch villain nearly, or like a two patch villain. Everyone goes, well, how'd you do such a good job? Execution. Yeah. And also having... like time for time, about 300 times more time with the actual storytelling, because FF14 is a JRPG and they're effectively incomparable in terms of actual storytelling techniques. There's some overlap, and at the end of the day, it's how you feel about a world, and that's what works really well. But it's like the idea of, we need to do this over multiple expansions. Maybe if the takeaway is we need more time with people, yes. But they also need to actually have an expansion that tells a story and make sure that they, whatever way they scope a story, that they can tell it within an expansion. Because the worst part of Shadowlands was, like, if Shadowlands was one expansion, this expansion is literally just from beginning to end all about, say, Bastion, and all about how the Kyrian are like, we pursue this path, maybe our path is wrong. Then you could see how you have a raid in Bastion, you have 3 or 4 dungeons in Bastion, you could see how you could start to weave together, and people go, okay, makes sense, right?
Yeah, and it's spirit healers.
I understand it all.
Like, it's spirit healers, so people would have accepted it.
Yeah, people right, we can see that. But the problem is they tried to do far too much.
Yeah.
And they don't have the time to do it all. So you kind of get, here's obviously they dropped the Drust stuff. That was clearly planned.
Yeah.
But you look and you go, what's all this mask stuff in Ardenweald? And you do a couple of, was it the side quest? I think the start is Blooming Villains, because all of the titles are references to Persona 5, and that's why I remember it so well. But all the quest names are references, and they're made to fit. I go, okay, well, that actually was that, and some of how the Gorm worked. I could see how you were weaving a narrative. Except I got to the end of the zone and then it was like, kill the mask fucker and go back to Orbo. You're like, but why did I not have a dungeon that dealt with this? What was the, like, because obviously the Gorm was in Tierna Scythe.
Yeah.
And that was kind of another bit of, Tredova. Oh, wait, this thing has sentience?
No, we'll never deal with that. Nope.
Wait, the Gorm had sentience? Wait, how does life actually come about? Did it get the sentience from eating the wild seed? Hang on, is the way Ardenweald doing things actually correct? Or is this some kind of weird... This doesn't feel quite right. Maybe the villains weren't all that villainous in the end? And then just goes, sorry, we don't have time for that. Let's get back to the mall with the jailer. You're like, tell me a story and finish telling me the story, please.
Yeah, we ended up
That's
with
all we need
just
to do.
all of this threadbare shit, and then the holes in the boat were plugged with stay a while and listens.
Yeah.
To just, kind of think, oh, well, this character should have talked to that character, so we'll do a stay a while and listen. And that just ends up being a crutch. And I think they know that, right? Because it's ideal when all of these things feel well-paced and like, I'd almost say well-edited, if you kind of get my meaning. So, look, if this basically just means more planning and more consistency of narrative, then this is absolutely a good sign, right? And at the very least, the lore topics you were talking about last week, like, we both enjoyed those.
Yep.
It's the sort of thing where if they can have that background lore continue to be expanded upon, and they can just have a good, I'm not even asking for a great A-plot. I just want a good A-plot with some very cool moments, which traditionally has been Blizzard's thing. Because, like, Legion's plot was, it was no incredible thing. It was good, and then it had very cool moments. The very cool moments stick out in people's heads. You remember them, they feel really cool. That's all that World of Warcraft needs to do. It can then have its complex lore existing in the background of that, and that actually ends up being enough for the formula to work.
Yeah, because they did a lot of little self-contained little side stories that you went through. Because I remember someone on website.com like give a very abridged version of what all of the all the classes were doing in the middle of the Legion stuff. The Legion Oracle class. Obviously that was expanded over the course of expansion a little bit. But it's like, oh, okay, so they all had little self-contained stories that you did. And were they great? No. Did the Priest and Paladins have to do the same thing because they clearly ran out of time and budget and went, we've only got one light story, how do we spread it across? But everyone had this their own little thing to do. It's like, oh, sweet. That's pretty cool, actually. Nice one. That's why people enjoyed that. People enjoyed having a story, even if the hunters didn't really do anything. Well, I suppose they killed a character. And then it's mostly just killing dreadlords, which, made sense, actually. And now that's been ruined because the dreadlords are working for the jailer the whole time. Fuck you, Blizzard. But no, that's the idea of just, hey, here's straight line of story, and it starts, it has a middle, and has an end. And there were lots of those, and people did those, and went, that's cool. And you're like, okay, well, that's what you have to do then. Make a story with a start, a middle, and an end. Not one with a start and an end, or a middle and an end, or an end and then a start. One with a start, middle, and an end. Maybe if you're ambitious, have two middles. Go start, middle one, middle two, end.
Oh my god.
That's crazy. That's 4 patches. You could do it though. You give it a try.
Yeah. Could you imagine getting 4 patches, something like the Mage Tower, Brawlers Guild returning? Where'd that go?
Oh yeah.
Some battlegrounds. Could you imagine a WoW patch cycle that feels fully featured? Could you imagine that? Wouldn't that be insane? Because I look at even the most recent patch and round, it's like, all right, cool, Zereth Mortis, but should have had Battleground.
Yeah.
Should have had. Well, and I suppose now we maybe understand why they have 750 staff working on WoW. Isn't it 750?
It's about,
thereabouts.
I think it's including Perlaria, it was 735 credits when I checked in beta.
Damn.
It may be different now, and it might be smaller because there's people who were credited and since left. But there might be people who've since joined because they're hiring, and so hard to know what the difference is. But fundamentally, it's like, they clearly struggle to make content. Hopefully that's fixed. Hopefully that was a COVID plus organizational problem that's now fixed. Hopefully, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.